why embroidery and other crafts cost a lot of money. Quite honestly, the answer is because they should. Today, the plan is to finally get this piece finished, and I've been working on this Tambour sort of water inspired piece for about 2 years now, so it's about time that I put it to bed. I've really quite enjoyed working on this project. I've put it down and picked it up as I've needed to, which is kind of why I started it in the first place. Tambour's one of these things that you need to, as we say, keep your hand in. You need to make sure your skills are there and ready for when you want to use them. When earlier this year we were teaching a Tambour class at the London Embroidery School, I obviously wanted to get in a good number of hours practice before we began with that, so that I looked nice and fluid and I could teach it properly. And you do get rusty with this really quite fast, so it's an important skill to keep up in that respect. The piece in the first place, I didn't want to overthink. I am a terrible overthinker, and I try not to allow myself to procrastinate by forcing myself to make quick decisions. Whether they are always the best decisions or not, that's a whole other matter. So in order not to think about it too much, with this one I decided that I would just pick an image that I liked and, transfer the design onto the fabric and get started with it. I think that these ombre threads are really useful for that sort of thing because they give you a lot of depth and texture right off from the bat, and you don't have to think too much about trying to create too much design contrast. You can kind of just get on with it, and that's what needed to happen with this piece, really. I just needed to practice, but you want to make it something nice at the same time, why not? So this was sort of a shortcut for that. I had thought that as I was going along that it was all looking a bit, I had taken too many shortcuts and just got on with it, and it was fine as like a practice piece, but it wasn't really a beautiful thing in itself, which I kind of wanted it to be both. Who doesn't want everything to be both, right? But now I've got a bit further into it, I do think it is quite effective, particularly from a little bit of a distance. The threads that I chose to work in, these Madeira machine threads, are a little bit tricky, and I could have chosen something easier for myself, definitely. Getting that nice ombre effect is really worthwhile, so, it's a trade-off. They do split quite a lot, they are quite delicate, they are quite thin, all of which has really added to the number of hours that I've spent working on this, of which I have lost count. I didn't really record it because I just kind of partially just wanted to enjoy the process. Sometimes that is really a big part of embroidery for me, is just the act of doing is important. So trying not to think too much around the other stuff around it, like how much time it has actually taken, and kind of clocking in the times when I start and finish so that I can accumulate it properly, kind of takes away from the doing a little bit. So I didn't do that with this piece. I just wanted to practice, and I think I have achieved that. Some of you may have seen earlier parts of this particular project, as I have got a few videos on it on my channel, and a lot of the time they have been quite slow moving videos, and I noticed that, you know, like from a watch time perspective it's relatively low on those fronts, and that's fine. But for me, they were more about trying to demonstrate, you know, just how long it does take to do these things, and communicating to people who perhaps don't stitch how long it takes to do these things, and therefore how much value can be placed upon it, or how much value it intrinsically has by how much effort you have to put in to get it out. With craft, I do think that we massively undervalue it as a medium of art, and particularly with embroidery, there's a real fine line whether people consider it to be art or not. And when people think about arts and crafts, and I use the word craft quite a lot in my work because I do think of myself as a crafter, a craftsman, but sometimes I kind of ebb and flow between whether I am an artist or not. And I do think that that is a bit of a societal view on the traditional kind of women's arts or women's pastimes as not being arts, because kind of intrinsically they're done by women, which obviously is no longer so much the case, but the kind of stain of that still remains in that people are like, oh, well, you know, embroidery isn't art, sewing isn't art. But I would argue that, you know, some of the textile art that I see is absolutely incredible, and I don't know how you could look at it and not be moved. And for me, that kind of is the definition of art. If it can communicate things to you in a visual medium and move you, then it's art to me. But I think that craft as well gets a really bad name. A lot of the time when you talk to people who don't craft or make, they tend to think kind of craft as, you know, like felt and gluing things, and that is a part of it, absolutely, and that is the way that a lot of people get into making and arts and crafts. For me, craft is about the skill and the practice and the honing. So craft isn't this kind of dirty, naive word that I think it gets associated with being quite a lot. It is about patience and dedication. These things take time. I think that is an absolute unquestionable part of craft. We are so quick to want things now, and you can't have that with craft, which is all part of its value. It's why it costs a lot of money. It takes someone a lot of time, and not only does it take someone a lot of time to do it, it takes a lot of time to learn it and to maintain those skills, and that is all part of its value. This tambour piece is a prime example of that. It's only when you do it day in, day out, and keep your hand in, that you get really smooth. You get to being as fast pretty much as you can be, and I am not that fast by any means. I don't do this every day. It's one of my kind of many craft skills, I would say. It's not my speciality by any means, but that has to come with a value and a price. But I think it's important for people to understand why embroidery and other crafts cost a lot of money. Quite honestly, the answer is because they should. Tambour is a really fascinating area of embroidery to me. It's somewhat steeped in mystery, and I think that's probably a slightly colonial thing. Tambour is sort of the Western version of Ari, which is a very similar type of embroidery, but that was done in the East, in India and such countries, where there is still a really big community of really talented craftspeople doing that kind of work. And I think that gets a bit of a bad rep as well, that people think that work done out in the East is inherently less valuable or less skilled than things that Western artisans produce. And that is just not the case. Like, they really are artisans in their own right, craftspeople in their own right, and they are the sort of people that will be producing Ari based work day in, day out for, you know, their whole careers. That is their speciality, and it is beautiful work. But it is something very interesting about textile work, that the textiles creators are so often anonymous and completely uncredited usually. You know, you're lucky if you can find the company maker of something, no mind the actual person who created a piece. And historically that sort of information is just not included at all. I was watching Kathy Hay, who's making this peacock dress, which is a Worth recreation from 18 something. I can't remember the details off the top of my head, but basically she's trying to recreate the embroidery on it, and it's called the peacock dress because it's got peacock embroidery all over it. And I think most of that has been done in bullion work, but it's, you know, she was trying to find out more about how it was made, and they know that the whole part of the dress, like why the dress was commissioned in the first place, was to celebrate the artisans of India, because it was worn by the Viceroy of India. She made the effort in her recreation, because she's working with an Indian company, as she wants to recreate it in the same way. Love that. To actually find out the name of the person who did the sample for her, you know, the embroiderer. And I just really appreciated that, because it's so often completely unmentioned who they are. I am super surprised at kind of how effective this piece has looked to become as it's coming towards its completion. I have got a bit of a problem with some of the threads. I think I might have to come in with a bit of fray check to kind of glue the knots into place, because this thread is very slippy, and so it does sometimes unknot itself even when you feel like you had it secured to start with. So that is a bit of a pain, and I hope that that won't ruin it. Yeah, I'll show you what I mean. See, that's quite watery. You get that effect from it, and hopefully once like the edges are cleaned up, because the frame will be slightly smaller than those edges, it should look cute. I just need to find a really nice frame to put it in, I think. It's funny with Tambour, because I do really like the repetitive nature of it, and the fact that you do just kind of create the same stitch over and over, and that's what's effective about it. But quite shallowly, I do also find it a little bit annoying, because I always find that my thumb on my underneath hand gets scratched up loads because of the sharpness of the hook, which, yeah, does sound really ridiculously shallow. But when I'm having to film other techniques as well, then it does make it look really scraggy and gross. So it's a bit of a tricky one. And like the pad of my first finger on my underneath hand, I use for sort of judging where the stitch is, as to where I need to wrap the thread. So that tends to get a bit stabbed. I did come to the realization that the top section really should have been dark, not light. So I decided to take that out now and redo it, because if I get to the end of the stitching and then think, oh, I should change that, I probably won't, and that would not be smart, because laziness will get the better of me. It's annoying because the top section is quite hard to do because it's all quite close to the edge. Okay, this is not the angle. Back to it. Nearly done. So nearly done. It's exciting. Now I've corrected that top section, which I think looks a lot better. I'm glad I did it. I'm replenished with my coffee as well on the go. Just got this two little sections here left, and then it's over. Though I am realizing that between this and the other project that I've got on the go at the moment, well, one of many, but this one in particular, is that I really like textiles that evoke movement. I think that's what's most effective about this piece, is that sense of movement that you get from it, that lets you know that it's water, because it's pretty abstract. You know, there's only 2 threads in it, so there's not a lot of visual information, if you will, going on in here to tell you what it's about, but I do think that you still get that coming across just about. The other piece that I mentioned is my sequin landscape project, which I'm really excited to share with you in the near future when that gets a little bit more underway. But that is all about movement and, I guess, kind of impressionism, which this is too to some extent. This is always the bit in a project where I get excited about finishing and start to rush towards the end, and this is where I start to make mistakes. So now I've said that on camera, let's not do that. Take your time. That's what this channel is all about. kind of want to see it again. And that's what I keep looking for. But also it's good to refresh your eyes when you're doing quite close work like this, to, you know, encourage them to reset at a different distance. And the allure of cute things to see down the garden is strong. One thing I won't miss when I do finish this piece in only a few stitches time is Tambour shoulder, which is this like hunch that I do with this right shoulder to lift the hand, because you're always like dropped because of one hand being underneath and one hand being on top of the frame. So I can feel it building underneath my shoulder blade on the right side. So I look forward to not having that for a little while. Don't drop the stitch now. And I'm done. Oh my gosh. It's complete. I could deserve a little sip of coffee for that. Unfortunately has gone a bit cold now. Oh, I'm so pleased it's done. Let me know what you think in the comments below of this project. I've got a few more in the pipeline, so I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. And if you want to see more about this sort of thing and the future projects, then do make sure you're subscribed to Taking Time with Tasha so that you don't miss anything. That's all from me for now. Bye! And that it was all looking a bit, you know, unconsidered, inconsidered, unconsidered? You pick. It does feel like these days I'm just like, yeah, I'll just treat myself. Everything is a treat. I don't know. I should know these details better if I'm going to talk about it, I guess. Do make sure you're subscribed. Do make sure you're